Okay, welcome back. This is CD number 3, how to set and achieve your goal from investing in property. Now, this is all about getting what you want from investing in property. Now, it's very important that you actually have a target that you want to achieve from investing in property. It's very, very, very important. It's no point just saying you want to get into property and you want to earn loads of money. It's not really about. It's about that, and I don't think anyone accidentally gets rich. I think you've always got to have something to strive for, something to see whether you're on the right track, and something that you can really gun after so that you can measure and plot and see how you are performing at any point in time when you're embarking on any kind of business. You know, as an accountant, we always viewed financial projections. Every company that you saw had a budget. And I'm sure if you work, you know, the business that you work for has probably got a budget that you have to work to and compare yourself to see whether you're performing to budget, ahead of budget, or dare I say it, below budget. So it's very important that you know where you're going. So this CD is about actually how you determine your goal and how you make sure that that goal that you set is the right goal, and it forms the whole basis of what we talk about from now on. So regarding goals, there are 5 things that I think are important when you're setting your goal. Number 1, the goal's got to be achievable. Number 2, it's got to be motivational. Number 3, it's got to be understandable. Number 4, it's got to be memorable. And number 5, it's got to be measurable. So achievable, that's the first one I mentioned. Now, to understand this, you really have to look at the extremes. Now, if you're someone that's got no money and you're looking to build £1 billion portfolio in 3 months, then you'd have to consider that kind of unachievable. Because with the greatest respect, I don't know your strengths and I don't know what you're capable of, but if you turn around and said to me you're going to go from 0 to £1 billion in 3 months, I'd have to say you're crazy. And you'll probably work that out as day 2, 3, 4, 5 progresses. You're going to see that you're not going to get there that quick. So you don't want to set yourself something that's unachievable, but then in the same sense, you don't want to set yourself something that is too achievable. So if you said you want to have one property, you want to buy one property in 10 years, then that's too achievable. So it's all about getting the balance, making sure that you set your goal that is outside of that comfort zone, but not in the zone of impossibility. So if you, for example, if you was earning £3,000 a month and you was age 30, and you said that you wanted to have a portfolio of 25 properties that are going to give you an income of £3,000 a month after mortgages in a period of 3 years, and you knew you had your weekends to do this, to build this portfolio, you'd have to say to yourself, well, yeah, that's achievable. Now, if you was a really ambitious 30-year-old that earned £3,000 a year and was going to dedicate your evenings and your weekends to achieving your goal, then you could probably push it up to maybe £6,000-7,000. But you have to work within reasonableness. So that's number 1, achievable. Number 2, motivational. That's also linked to achievable, but you know, it's not that only has it got to be achievable. It's got to be something that you want to achieve. Essentially, it's got to inspire you. It's got to motivate you. So, using that previous example, £3,000 a month, if you was earning £3,000 a month and you set yourself a target of earning £3,000 a month within 5 years, now that sort of says to you, well, yeah, I can leave my job, if that's the sort of thing you want to do. So if I was to think about the goals that I set when I was starting out, when I was earning £10,000 a year as a trainee chartered accountant, I would set myself just buying one investment property, because that was pretty much all I could afford, and that was stretching me, but to the point that it wasn't impossible, but it was also not easily achievable. So that was my first initial goal. Then second, after that, as my salary increased, I saved up, and the second goal was to have 5 properties. And then after that, when I handed in my notice, it was to have the same salary that I was earning before, which was £1,700 a month. So these were fairly achievable targets, but not easily achievable, but also, you know, impossible. And as you go on through life, you have to look at what your own income is and what you're capable of and what you're able to achieve. So you've got to look at your circumstances now and see that, well, okay, am I being ridiculous here? And run it by your partner, your family, your friends, and say, well, look, do you think this is a crazy idea or a crazy target? And also, in a way, when you do run your sort of goals by people, and if people do say it's crazy, it can actually be quite a motivator, which moves me quite nicely onto number 2, which was what I said about motivational. Now, there's no point setting yourself a target that doesn't motivate you. So even if it is achievable and it's pushing you, it's outside that comfort zone, it has to be motivational. Now, one of the best motivators for me was to achieve my own salary that I was getting from work from property. Now, that motivated me, because that said to me, that almost gave me leaving work a rubber stamp of approval, because it's saying, well, I can be as successful as I was before, but doing a lot less. So it was one of those things it was motivational. It's something I wanted to achieve because it was proving something to myself. So in a way, you've got to get whatever target it is. Like future targets after that for myself was, I wanted to have 100 properties. I don't know what it was. I just liked the number. It sounded like, you sound like a play if you've got 100 properties. Now, whether that's irrational or rational, it doesn't matter, because it motivated me. I wanted 100, and like my my goal currently at the minute is by 2012 is to have 1,000 properties. Now, whether it's just a number, but to me, I don't know, maybe because I'm obsessed by numbers, but that to me is really motivational. And another one of my targets is to have £100 million portfolio. That's, people talk about 7-figure salaries, 8-figure portfolios. This is a 9-figure portfolio, and I don't know, I just feel a bit of a play if I've got that, and so it motivates me. So set yourself a target that makes you think, yeah, this is something I really want to get. Number 3, understandable. Now, the goal that you want to achieve in property, it's got to be easily understood by yourself. Now, I could set myself a target of having a gross profit percentage of 63%. Now, that is a genuine target, but for me to actually know whether I'm achieving that target, I have to sit down on a spreadsheet to see, well, am I achieving it, am I not? So it's not easily interpretable. It's not something that just can easily sit in the back of your head and every time you're doing a deal whether you're achieving your target or not. I mean, another one of my targets was to always invest in 12% yielding properties. Now, the reason why it was 12% was that it was really easy to calculate. Not only is 12% a good return, but it was easy to calculate. If you wanted to get 12% yield on a property, all you had to do was knock off the 2 zeros of the purchase price. If you could get that rent, it was a good deal. You need to have something where the goal has got to be something that you understand. Now, if you've got a really intelligent brain and you've got a calculator type like brain, and you can quickly work out percentages, gross profit percentages, and you want to have a target of gross profit percentage, and that's fair enough. If you can understand it and you can compute it quickly, then that's cool, but it has to be understandable to you. Number 4, the goal has got to be memorable. Now, it's no good when someone says to you, what's your goal, and you have to think or refer back to a piece of paper or your notebook to say, oh yeah, that's my goal, because if you haven't got it imprinted in your brain, you're not going to achieve it. It has to be something that in every action you do, every screen you look at, when you're looking at Rightmove or looking through the papers or filling out any kind of form, mortgage form, or doing anything to do with your business, in the back of your mind you know that you're seeing, like, so for my example, I'm seeing that 1,000 property portfolio that's in the background, so like everything you're doing in the background, you've got that goal imprinted in the back of your brain, so that everything you're doing is running through your veins, so that you know that what you're doing is going to help you get to your eventual goal, which is X number of properties or whatever it is, the profit per month. And then the number 5 thing I said was measurable. So I think it's very important to have a goal that is measurable. if you just said, I want to have lots of money, then that's not measurable. You know, you got to say, you know, how much is lots of money? Work it out. If you say, well, I want to have a nice house, I want to have a nice car. Well, what house do you want? What car do you want? Where's the house located? What type of car is it? What sort of holidays do you want to take? What sort of things do you want in your house? You know, so all these things that if it's to do with money, which I hope it is, then specify what it is, put a figure to it. Because the reason that you need to do that is because you can then chart how well you're doing on your goal. So if you want £1 billion property portfolio and you've currently got £1 million property portfolio, then you know you've got 999 million to go. So make sure it's measurable. So they're the 5 things that I say about your goal. Make sure 1, it's achievable, 2, it's motivational, 3, it's understandable, 4, it's memorable, and 5, it's measurable. Okay, and then the next part about your goal is, which is a very, very key factor in all of this, is when are you going to achieve your goal? You have to put a time frame to your goal. It's no point saying, I want to achieve this. Well, do you want to achieve it on your 17th birthday or your 70th birthday? It's got to have that time frame so that you can then plot and monitor your performance of you achieving that goal. So in my example, I want to achieve 1,000 properties by 2012. Now, I've got it so specific, I've got it down to an actual day. I want it on the day before I turn 41. And I've got that on as a screensaver on my computer. And it says, and it counts down the time in days and by the second to the day when I turn one day before my 41st birthday. Now, it's just because I want to achieve certain things by the time I'm 40, and I'm thinking the last time I'm 40 is on this day. So, and it works out as 1,364 days. And so I know that I have to achieve £85 million worth of property purchases in 1,364 days, which works out roughly as me buying a 20k property roughly every other day. So I can see that, and I know I can plot, and I know in the back of my mind I can remember, did yesterday I buy a property? If not, well, maybe I need to up the pace. So it's constantly in there, just knowing whether I'm on track. So you should have that time and put that to your goal. So now let's just say you want to earn £5,000 a month in the next 3 years. Well, that's 36 months away, and that means if you want to earn an income of £5,000 a month, then, well, how many properties is that? Are you looking at properties to buy that chuck out £200-300 a month profit? Then if it's £200 a month profit, that's 25 properties. If you've got to buy 25 properties in 36 months, that's roughly just one. Well, if you were buying one every month, you'd be doing well, but if you need roughly one every 6 weeks, so you know after 6 weeks, if you've bought a property, you're on target. If you haven't bought a property, then you're behind target, and if you've bought 2 properties in 6 weeks, you're ahead of target. So it keeps that mental check of knowing where you're at. Okay, so that's all about setting targets and putting a time frame to it. So what you should be able to do now is to identify what you want in the next 12 months. Now, using that example of £5,000 a month, and you want to head towards that in 3 years. In year 1, if we're assuming a linear approach to your goal, you're roughly looking to buy 1 property every 6 weeks. So in, say, 52 weeks in a year, so what's that? Let me just calculate that. 52 divided by 6, it's roughly 9. You need to be buying 9 properties this year, and you need to be buying 1 every 6 weeks. So work that out. If you set yourself a goal of buying 10 properties, you want to have a portfolio worth £1 million in 12 months. Whatever it is, work it out so that you can know what it is you're going for the next 12 months, because this is what's going to set you and keep you on the path of achieving your goal, which this goal that we're going after in 12 months is only a mini goal in your whole eventual goal. But these 12 months is where it's at. So go away, think about, discuss it with your partner, or maybe you want to just keep it to yourself, but you need to get inspired about what that goal is. And remember those 5 things I said: achievable, motivational, understandable, memorable, and measurable. Okay, so then once you've got that, then I can show you how to achieve your goals. And this is part 2 of the CD, which is all about how to achieve your goals. Right, now if you're struggling to come up with a goal, here's some ideas. You could have profit before tax, you could have profit after tax, you could have rental income, total rental income, you could have portfolio size, so actually number of properties, you could have portfolio value, you could have net equity, so the portfolio value less debt is your target. And then the different time periods you can go for: 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. You could use your birthdays as the pivotal point, so you could say by the time you're 30, 35, 40, and then basically you can put the two together, and so what you should have by the end of it is an amount and by when. And that is what I want you to write down. That has got to be, you've got to put that on your door, on the back of your door or something, to say, right, this is what you want to achieve. Well, I mean, I use it as a screensaver sort of homepage thing that just says to me what I'm going to have, but have that so you know where you're going with all this. Okay, so you've set your goal, you've determined when you want it, we've worked out what the goal is for the next 12 months. Then this part of the CD is all about the actual formula of how to actually achieve this goal that you want in 12 months. Now this is what I call the magic formula of how to get rich from property, and it's split into three. You've got to just follow 3 steps. It's very simple. It's just these 3 steps. It's the 3 steps that I've done that's taken me from £500 up to a £15 million portfolio. So number 1, it's you maximise your starting capital. Number 2, you invest wisely. And number 3, you remortgage and reinvest aggressively. Now the key words in all those 3 parts of what you've got to do is maximise, wisely and aggressively. Now number 1 is maximise your starting capital. To buy property you need money, right? I mean, you need to pay for fees. I know we're talking about no money down, but you have to cover for fees, voids. You can't just assume that everything's going to go rosy from day one. So the more money you've got, the more properties you can buy to cater for those rainy days. So you need to maximise your starting capital. So that's why the key word is maximise. Number 2 is invest wisely. Now I deem that to be greater than 10% yield, which I'll talk about further in the CD, but it's you got to have greater than 10% yield as I deem that as a wise investment. And then number 3 is remortgage and reinvest aggressively. Now aggressively is the key word, because you have to extract every bit of money you can out of the portfolio that you build. So that's why I say aggressively. So let me get into the first one: maximise your starting capital. Now that's all about just getting the biggest pot of money you can get today. Right, now that is how I did it. I did all of these things that I'm about to tell you. Now the first one is, which is the cheapest way of raising any money, is to sell off any obsolete assets. Now if you've got computers, electronic goods, second cars, even first cars, if you've got all these things that you don't use are considered obsolete. Now what I deem obsolete is anything that doesn't make you any money. Now that may sound a bit harsh, but if you're trying to make some money now, you have to sacrifice. You have to go without certain things. Now, I mean, in my own story, I used to sacrifice even decent food. I used to eat 20p sandwiches, from Tesco's Blue Stripe. I used to make them myself. I'd treat myself to a nice Indian chicken biryani on a Friday, but other than that, I used to scrimp and save, and because I was using every bit of money I could to make work for me. And I know that sounds crazy, but when I think about it now, all those 10, 20, 50 pounds that I saved from eating cheap food, it's definitely paid off big time now. So if you can look around you, see if you can. eBay's a wonderful thing. You can raise a lot of money from just selling obsolete assets. You can raise 1 or 2 grand, and that 1 or 2 grand can pay for fees like survey fees, arrangement fees to purchase the property. Sometimes you don't always get it fully, no money down, and so you need to pay sort of reservation fees, etc. So you should look to liquidise any kind of obsolete assets. Right, the second thing of maximising your starting capital is put your savings towards it. Now, that's things like your own savings money in the bank. That's also ISAs. If you're earning 4 or 5% tax free from an ISA, well, put it towards property where you can earn 300-400% in 5 years from investing in property. So you've got to take your money out of all these kind of tax efficient savings, because really they're not worth anything, because the maximum you can put in anyway is £3,000. So they really are useless. And then if you've got any shares or any kind of funds that you've got you've put that money in locked up, get it all out, put it in the bank, so you've got that money there ready to invest. So that sort of activity does not cost you anything. There's no cost of borrowing there on that sort of capital raising that you do. Now what I'm going to talk about, there is a cost, and this is increasing in cost as well, of how much it costs you to raise this sort of finance. Now the easiest way of doing it is remortgaging your own home. Now you may not own your home, so this is only for homeowners now, but if you've got you own your own home, you've probably got a fair bit of equity in there to access. Now you just remortgage, you just simply pick up your phone, speak to your mortgage lender and mortgage provider, and then just ask them for a further advance, and they'll just come around. And they sometimes even do desktop valuation. They don't even come around, and they can literally send you a cheque within days. So approach your own mortgage provider. If they're not playing ball, you can remortgage, even pay the penalties if you need to, just because you've got to think about this cash now that you get when you invest it. It doesn't matter if you pay a penalty now, because you're going to get a greater return further in the future. So look to remortgage your own home. Then you would look, if you already own a portfolio already, then look to remortgage those in the same way you remortgage your own home. Just speak to your current existing lenders on your portfolio and see if you can get further finance that way. And then also you can do what's called second charge lending on your own personal home. Now this is a bit more expensive. You're talking roughly 9 to 20% on this, is getting the second charge loan, which they can lend you probably up to about 100% of the value. So you could tweak out the last bit of equity from your home and get to use it. Now don't freak out of paying 20-25%. I mean, I'll tell you, I've probably paid 50-60% on some loans, but because I know I'm going to get such a good return, it doesn't faze me, and we'll get into the figures about that as we go further into the CD. But you need to raise as much money as you can, and probably as a rule of thumb, if you can get finance over 5 years up to about 30-35%, that's not bad. Because let me tell you, if you borrow £10,000 at 7% interest rate, that will cost you about £200 a month. If you borrow £10,000 at 30% interest rate, it will cost you about £240. So the difference is only £40 a month. And it sounds horrific, like paying 30% over 7%, but it's not really. And then if you're going to be borrowing over 12 months, you could probably pay up to, I would say, probably up to 50-60%. Hence, that's why credit cards are extremely good value. You know, you're talking less than 20% on credit cards, and you can even get it on zero. So credit, if you want to borrow over 12 months, pay up to about 50-60%. And that's why you hear the common story. You see lots of businesses set up on credit cards. And the reason is, it's easy, it's quick, there's no forms to fill out, you just get your money. You know, I've bought properties on credit cards. I bought a property for 11 grand, there's one in Campbelltown in Scotland. I bought it for 11 grand, wrote a cheque on a credit card, I was paying 0.9% APR. I had it for about 7 months, and I remortgaged within about 6 months and got a proper loan on it, and cleared the credit card debt and got it valued at 20,000. So you look to go for credit cards as well to raise money for deposits. Overdraft facilities, you could look at approaching your bank and asking for an overdraft facility, and literally they just give it to you. I mean, I got my one for 10k. I mean, I had to send them an email and ask for it, and they charged me £100, and I quite cheekily asked for a higher overdraft, but they refused that. But you know, you have to look at using your overdrafts because it's easily attainable and the rates are under 15%. And then you look also to get unsecured loans. When I started back, I applied for hundreds of loans. I took out about £100,000 in unsecured loans to investors, deposits. But yeah, so you try and get loans from unsecured. So you'd approach the bank. You'll see it all on the internet, moneysupermarket.com. Just search unsecured loans on Google and you'll get a whole load of stuff, and the rates are actually under 10%. So really good rates for, if you've got good credit, it's a definite good source of deposit money and fees money for buying properties. And then the final thing you can do if you're struggling to get any finance is you'd have to then look at giving away a share of your property pursuits to a partner. So if you might have a family member who might want to put up some of the money, but you do all the work, or they may even straight loan you the money. Now that could be a way of doing it, or you could get an early inheritance from your parents. Have a look at any ways where you can get money from people. Also, you could borrow off your family, get an early inheritance. Grandma or grandpa could be quite pleased that you're trying to do something for yourself and trying to take financial control of yourself, so that you'd be quite surprised that they might be quite happy to lend you the money or even give you the money. You never know. And then the final one is where you do a deal with someone where you give up an equity stake of your business in return for the money, so you just share the profits. That's one way of doing it without actually having to take any risk of borrowing, because in return for the money you're giving them a share of the profits. So that's a way of maximising your starting capital. So you could say, for example, and get £2,000 from obsolete assets, £10,000 from savings, another £10,000 from remortgaging your home, another £10,000 from remortgaging your current portfolio, another £10,000 from second charge lending, £10,000 again from credit cards, maybe another £10,000 from overdrafts, and then unsecured loans you could probably get 25k. So you could quite easily get your hands on 100k if you really push yourself and you've got assets that you can remortgage. And that way you get that amount of money for you to invest in properties. And this is what I'm going to talk about now. Investing wisely. This is the second part of the formula of getting rich. We've now established maximising your starting capital. The second one is invest wisely. Now, I deem wise as a greater than 10% yield. Now, let me first of all define what yield is. Yield is annual rent divided by purchase price. So if you buy a property and it costs you £100,000 and it rents out £500 a month, then what you do is you do 500 times 12 is 6,000, and then you divide it by 100,000, which gives you 6%. 6,000 divided by 100,000 is 6%. 6 divided by 100. Yep. So that is what yield is. And so to get a 10% yield, you would want to have the annual rent at 10% of purchase price. So take that example of that 100 grand property, you would want to get £10,000 rent. Now that would be £833 a month rent equals £10,000 a year rent divided by 100 grand. This gives you the 10%. So the sort of properties that give you a greater than 10% return are typically properties priced around the 50 to 60 mark, because you'll buy a property for 50k and you'll get 60k, and you'll get £500 a month on it, and that'll give you £6,000 rent and £60,000 purchase price. Now, I do a lot of consultations, and the amount of people that buy properties without even knowing what yield is amazes me. The reason why yield is so superior to any other calculation is because it factors into the whole calculation all variables. Now, this is explained best by comparing two properties. Now, if I said to you, property 1 delivers £100 a month profit, and property 2 delivers £100 profit per month, one costs £100,000, the other one costs £1 million. Now, I'd hope you could realise that the property that cost £100,000 and delivering £100 a month profit is superior to the property that cost £1 million and delivering £100 profit per month, because your risk profile based on borrowing £1 million compared to £100,000 is a lot greater. So you would want to take the minimum risk to get £100 profit per month. So to compare those two properties, you would have to have some form of calculation that took into account borrowings, and that's why yield works so much better than any other financial performance indicator. Because what you're doing is you're dividing the annual rent by the purchase price, where yield takes into account, okay, the cash that you're going to make on a monthly basis relative to the purchase price, and the purchase price is going to be a function of how much you're borrowing, and then how much you're borrowing is a function of interest rates. So if you know that you're buying a property at 10% yield and you're borrowing a fair amount to purchase that property, then you know that if interest rates are around about 5% and you're getting a yield of 10%, you know that you're fairly certain to be covering the mortgage costs. Now, if you're borrowing 100% of the purchase price, which I can teach you how to do that, and you're borrowing at 5% and you're getting a yield of 10%, it doesn't take a genius to work out that the profit you're making is 5%. It's 10% yield minus 5% borrowing cost is a 5% gross profit, and that's 5% of the amount borrowed. So if you bought £1 million worth of property and you're getting a gross profit yield of 5%, then you're making 5% of £1 million, which is £50,000 a year. So that can sort of help within your target. You could start thinking to yourself, well, okay, I want to own £1 million worth of property that yields 10%, that will give you that £50,000 gross profit per year. Another great thing about yield is the fact that I believe it's a great predictor of capital growth. Now, if you've bought a property that's yielding 12%, now a 12% yielding property is very desirable. Now, if you bought property yielding 12%, you probably would have paid about £30,000 to £40,000. Now, calculating that property as a ratio to average salaries in the area, it's probably 1.5 times 2 times average salary. Now, if you can get mortgages for first time buyers at 4.25 times salary, you would look at the property being valued at around about 70 to 80k as a minimum. So when markets recover and people start paying sensible multiples of salary, you will get a true price of 4 times salary, which would be about 80k. Now, if you've paid 40k, you know that you're going to get 80k growth. So it does lock in the capital growth. And also another thing is that, well, if you've bought a property at a 12% yield, that is a very attractive property even to an investor. And there'll be other investors that are happy to take, let's say, a 10% yield, because I mentioned about that being the threshold. So in effect, I would be willing to pay more because the yield is inversely related to the purchase price. As the yield goes down, the price goes up, and that means you're making money. And so, using simple figures, if you've bought something at 12% yield, and there are investors out there that are happy to take a 6% yield, which there are many investors that are willing to take a lot less than 6%. If you bought something at 12% and an investor's willing to buy the property at 6% yield, they're willing to pay twice as much as you paid for it. So using simple figures, if you've bought a property that rents out for £12,000 a year at £100,000 purchase price, which works out as a 12% yield, you could find a buyer that will pay £200,000 for that property with the same rent of £12,000, because that would still give a 6% yield. So it locks in the capital growth if you buy a high yield. And then another reason why buying high yielding properties is attractive is that as the property price grows, you can remortgage out and still make the property cash flow positive. So you'll get scenarios where, for example, two properties. Property one you bought for £100,000, rents out £12,000 a year, and it doubles to 200. Now your mortgage payment, if you was to remortgage the whole amount, would go from, say, £6,000 a year to £12,000 a year. So if you're getting a rent of £12,000, you could collect the rent of £12,000, pay the new mortgage cost of £12,000, make zero, but you'll have £100,000 in your pocket, and you'll be able to use that £100,000 to invest more. Now, if you take the other example where it's only a 6% yielding property, so you bought a property for £100,000 and the rent is £6,000 and your mortgage cost is £6,000, if you go to a mortgage company and say, I want to access my equity in that property that's now worth £200, they won't lend to you, because simply you cannot increase your mortgage payment than greater than the rent. And usually, they even want a margin on top of the mortgage payment. So when you invest in high yielding assets, it's easier to access your equity. So so there are plenty of landlords out there, the ones that have bought at a 6% yield, that may have a £1 million portfolio that doesn't make any money on a monthly basis, may only have £500,000 as a loan outstanding, but can't access that other £500,000 equity. The only way they can access it is selling the property, which means that they've got to pay capital gains tax, etc., and they lose they're out of the property game. So high yielding assets enables you to access the equity by remortgaging. So then this moves on nicely to the third thing. The whole formula about getting rich from investing in property is all about remortgaging and reinvesting aggressively. Now this is where you get really rich, because everything you buy will rise in value. That's fact. Now even if you buy a poor property investment, it will rise in value in the long term. So let's just say you've bought a £50,000 property, the rent's £500 a month, the average salaries in the area 25k a year, so the likelihood of that property rising to 75,000 is kind of realistic, and that happening in say 2 years, I would say is quite likely, because you've got, even at 75k, the property will yield roughly 8.5%, which is still attractive, and it will only be 3 times average salary in the area. So as soon as that capital growth occurs, you want to remortgage to get access to that 25k. You want to get access to that 25k so that you can remortgage, access that cash, and start buying more properties. All you have to do is make sure that when your property rises in value, you're onto your mortgage provider to get in a further advance. You have to keep abreast of the property prices of where you've bought, so that you can access your equity. So every 3 or 4 months, check on Rightmove or check the local newspaper, see what the prices are doing. And as soon as you see, I would say roughly, if you see about £10,000 equity growth, I would go in for a remortgage. Now, what I used to do, I used to be quite cheeky. I used to buy a property and then I would hold it for say 3 or 4 months, and then I would go in for a remortgage. And when I would put in the application, now let's say I bought it for say £40,000, I would go to the mortgage company and say, I bought it, I think it's worth £80,000, and sometimes they'd value it up at £80,000, and even if they didn't, they would still come back and value it, say 60, 65, and that's still 50% more than what I paid for it. And surveyors are only human beings at the end of the day, and they can make mistakes, and if they make a mistake in your favour, you can gain massively, and that's what's happened to me in the past, and that's what we do at the minute when we source deals for clients. Because there's a differential between what a property is really worth and what a surveyor puts on it, and what a surveyor puts on it is what a bank's willing to lend, and then if they're willing to lend, you can take that money to invest more. So what you have to do is watch the price movements once you've bought. But I just want you to really understand the 3 stages, which is maximising your starting capital, investing wisely, which is greater than 10%, and then remortgaging and reinvesting aggressively. You have to do it fast, and then you keep on repeating that process as a continuous process of always getting cash together, always remortgaging and reinvesting. And it's only when you've got to your goal is when you can stop. Now, if you need help building a property portfolio, just give us a call on 0870 990 3205. That's 0870 990 3205.